Hi folks, in this video, I'm going to show you how bank rules work. And bank rules is a feature inside the banking transactions module in QuickBooks where you can connect your QuickBooks to banks and all the transactions download, and then you sit down and categorize each of them manually, or you create rules to automatically categorize the transactions for you so you don't have to do one by one. So in this video, I'm already making the assumption that you already have a QuickBooks account and that you have already connected QuickBooks to your bank. If you haven't done that yet, go in the links below. I'm going to have a link for how you sign up for a new QuickBooks Online account, how you connect the bank. So there'll be some videos kind of explaining that. And then once you have your account set up and your bank's connected, then you can get to this point where you can actually create bank rules. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go into banking. On the left-hand side, there's an icon or a menu called banking. That might be called transactions in some people's QuickBooks, depending on what version of QuickBooks Online you have. That might say banking or transactions. And then all the transactions are going to be downloaded into each of the accounts. So for example, I connected 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 credit cards into QuickBooks, and they're all downloading transactions. I also connected PayPal into QuickBooks, and that's also downloading transactions. I'm going to show you within the context of credit card expenditures how we create rules to automatically classify all these transactions. So anyway, I'm on one of the credit cards here, and right now I have it sorted by description, where I'm going to sort it by date so we can see all the transactions that were downloaded. And as you can see, we have transactions going back all the way to December 26, 2019, and transactions downloaded all the way through February 7, 2020. So these are all the transactions that were downloaded in that account. Now I can manually go in there and classify each of these by hand. So I can go into GoDaddy and create a customer called GoDaddy, or pick my customer GoDaddy from my customer list. Select the category. So let's call this one advertising. And then go into here into add and just add that one transaction by hand. Now, if I add a transaction by hand, QuickBooks has this thing called implicit rules, which is not the same thing as the rules that we're about to talk about, which basically marks them in green, letting you know that these green ones were automatically classified by QuickBooks based on past behavior. So at this point, you could actually resort these all by description, and you can go down to all the GoDaddies, which are all green, as you can tell. And you actually don't need to create an explicit rule. I can actually select all these by clicking on each one or holding the shift key and clicking on the very last one, click on batch actions and accept it. And I actually didn't have to create an actual rule for it. It was used based on past behavior. But what I can do, instead of just working like that, create the explicit rule. That way I'm not doubting, whether or not, that's the actual category for it. So Apple is a good example here. So I'm going to create a rule for Apple. So I'm going to go into the rules tab. Then I'm going to go to the right-hand side, go where it says new rule. If you click on the little carrot drop-down menu, you have the option to import or export rules. We're not going to talk about that, but just so you know that what's in there. So we're going to go ahead and click on new rule. And then we're going to call this one Apple. We'll just call it Apple. And then it says, okay, is this for money coming out to pay Apple or money coming in from Apple? In this case, money's coming out. We're paying Apple. Apple's a vendor in this case. So go ahead and click on money out. Now I can select different bank accounts or credit cards. I can specifically say, look, this rule only applies to these credit cards. So if Apple is spent in these other credit cards, contextually it means something else. So maybe it should be a different category. Or I can do all banks and do that. Now, what I like to do is, if I do create a rule that has to do with a specific bank, so let's say, for example, it's just going to be this credit card, I usually do put a hyphen and put card 5548, whatever, letting me know that this rule only applies to that card. That's just for naming convention. But if I actually click all banks, I just put Apple all in this case. So that would be good enough. So that now it says, what are the criteria that this is going to use in order to know that that rule should apply? So the criteria is either description, bank text, or amount. So I'm just going to select description that contains the word Apple. Okay, now notice you have the option to is exactly to. So if we get Apple iTunes, Apple Store, Apple online, apple.com. If we get variations of that and I pick this one that says it's exactly, it's not going to work, right? So if I want Apple and anything else with the word Apple in it to apply, that will work. But if you have another vendor called, I don't know, Apple Supermarkets, and you don't want the Apple Supermarkets rule to be mixed in with this rule, then you're going to have to add a second condition and do does not contain and put the word supermarket, right? That way you will avoid getting this Apple Supermarkets to be mixed in with Apple, the computer company. So it's a couple of examples how you can use this contain, does not contain option for conditions. Then at the bottom is, what do I assign this to? So I'm going to assign it to an expense. That's correct. Category, so let's put this under office expenses. I should have an office expenses category here somewhere. There it is. And payee, so in this case, if I already have Apple created, I'm going to look for it. And I do have it in my vendor list, Apple. Or I can just create it typically just by typing Apple computers, whatever vendor name I want to create. Go to add, and it should create it into my vendor list. Let me type it again because it didn't take. Apple computer, click save. And now it should be on my drop-down list, Apple computer. So you can create it on the fly as you do the rule, or you can select it from your list if it's in there. Now, if you click on this little button that says assign more, that allows you to add an additional memo. I typically don't like to do that. I want the natural original memo from the bank to come in. And if I want to split it, if I go to add split, I can actually put 50% or 20% or whatever into one category or the other. So that's another option. So I'm typically not a fan of the split. So how do I get out of this split here? Oh, just click on the trash can there. Okay, good. So then you're going to see one more thing here. And then all the way in the bottom, there's an option that says automatically confirm transactions, which is down here in the bottom. I'm just going to skip that altogether and then click on save. So now my rule is created. You can actually see here the name of the rule, the conditions that apply, the settings. I can go back and click on edit if I want to edit or make any changes to that rule, so I can do that. Notice I didn't click on auto confirm because we don't want that yet. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then under actions, the other option would be to copy, disable it to make it inactive, or to delete it if I don't want to work with that rule anymore. Anyway, once the rule is created, I go back into banking, and then you're going to notice that now the Apple computers are automatically all classified. Now, something I like to do is, so I can sort of create the rules alongside this screen, is I'm going to make this screen sort of half the size here. Let me close the calculator, and I'm going to duplicate the tab. I'm going to click the duplicate tab, and then I'm going to drag this one out to the right. So I'm basically splitting the screen into two. So once I split the screen into two, what I can do is I can go back into rules and then click on new rule. I'm going to click on this hamburger icon here to get rid of. Let me just get rid of that and then go back to new rule. There we go. So then I can scroll them on the left hand side. I can kind of see them, and I can create the rules as I see the transaction. So here's Chevron, money out, all accounts, perfect. It contains the word Chevron, and this is gonna go into a category. This would be auto expenses, and the payee would be Chevron if it's already on my vendor list, or I can create it and I can click on save. So I created the second rule. Here on the left hand side is not showing up yet, but if I click on refresh, if I refresh the browser, sort this by date again, or actually sort it by description, and then notice that now the Chevron rule applied. So that's actually perfect. So let me go ahead and do Cigna. So let me go to new rule, and let's do Cigna. And then on the description, we'll also call this Cigna. And then category would be insurance. And then payee. Do we have Cigna in the vendor list? Yes, we do. Perfect. And then I'm going to click on save. And then the next one's going to be class marker. So I'm going to go to new rule, type class marker, copy and paste this. Let's see if I have the category. That's going to be, let's say, office expenses. And then payee, do I have the vendor? Yes, I do. Perfect. If you don't have the vendor, you have to create it. And then I'm going to click on save. And then I'm going to do, let's do Fandango. Fandango. Type Fandango there. And notice here on the left hand side, right, this is where I'm getting all of these from. I'm actually using the actual transactions from the bank. So let's say this is a personal one. Do we have an owner's? Let's see if we have an equity account here for my owner's expenses. So there isn't one. Let me create a category called, let me do it under equity, and we'll call this one personal expenses. So we'll do a equity personal expenses. Let me go back. Let me close this rule for a second, because sometimes QuickBooks acts up when you are trying to create accounts on the rule list. So let me go into accounts, chart of accounts, and let me create a new category for personal expenses. So let me do that under equity, and I'll click here, owner's equity, and then we'll call this one owner's personal expenses, because that happens sometimes by mistake. We will run some personal expenses through it. So I'm creating the account because it wasn't working on the rule side. So let me go back into banking, rules. Let's do add rule again, and that was the Fandango. Let's do Fandango. Spell that correctly. Category would be owners. Let me refresh this screen too. That would help to get a new account in there. All right, new rule. Fandango. Copy and paste that into description. Category. Owner's personal expenses, payee, Fandango, there we go, and click on save. Okay, on this side, I'm going to go ahead and refresh this so we can see what this screen looks like after we have refreshed those rules. And notice now everything is categorized up to that Fandango, and then there's two more transactions there that I can finish up. So let's do a new rule there, and let's just keep doing it. So let's do hubdoc.com. Spell that correctly. That needs to be spelled correctly. Copy and paste that into description. Category, let's say this is office expenses, and we'll do hubdoc.com. Save, and then the last one would be this one called TST El Colombiano. Let me just copy it here, because I could just copy it here and then go to new rule and bring that here, and then description, paste, category, meals and entertainment, and then do I have the vendor in my list? I don't, so let me create it. El Colombiano. Perfect. So go to add, save, and then let's, where is it? Oh, there it is, Colombiano. And then I click on save. So now I can go back into here, refresh this screen. So I'll refresh that screen, and everything should be automatically selected by the rules. So like the beautiful thing, I didn't have to go one by one and categorize them. The rules are set, and every single time this vendor gets downloaded, it will automatically apply by the rules. So at this point, all I have to do is select them all, go to batch actions, and click on accept. Beautiful thing. Pretty much as good as it gets. Let's go ahead and let me go ahead and close the rules here and expand this screen again. Let's go through a different credit card. So I already did this one. Let's go to the second credit card that I have here. And then let's see if anything was recognized already. I'm going to click here on the recognize tab. I notice that Chevron was picked up. Great thing. So at this point, I can just select them all, click on batch actions, and accept. Let's go back to all the transactions here, and let's experiment with automatically adding. So let's say, for example, all these Amazon transactions, I don't want to select them and then accept them. I want QuickBooks to automatically send them to the category. I don't even want to think about them. So at this point, I'm going to create a rule for Amazon and make it in the automatic confirm option. So I'm going to do it from here, which is actually really cool as well. So I'm going to select my vendor here, Amazon, and let's send this to office expenses. And then down here, notice that there's a button that says create rule from this transaction. So I'm going to click on that, create rule from this transaction. And what that's going to do is going to open up the rule menu, the full window, not just the side view. And at that point, I can just type Amazon here, call this Amazon, and to follow the same nomenclature as I talked about at the beginning, put all. And then on the amount equals, I'll delete that because I don't want only the $7.48 to come in there. So I'm going to delete that. And then I want this to be, let me go back for a second and see what the Amazon transaction is. So I'm gonna pick one that's different though. I'm gonna pick this one. This one happened to be a refund, so that was a little bit trickier. So I'm gonna do it for the second one here. So the first one I clicked was a refund, and I was trying to create a refund one. So let's try this again. Office expenses, and then go back here to create rule from this transaction. Try this again. Amazon all, money out, delete the dollar amount. Okay, and then make this an expense. Beautiful. Pay Amazon, category office expenses, and then this option that says auto categorize or add, which is the same thing as auto confirm. And then I click on save, and this is what this is going to do is it's going to take a couple of seconds because it's actually going to go back and automatically add all those Amazon transactions. So you'll see as soon as this is done, those transactions will actually be gone from the screen. So right now they're gone. See that all the Amazon transactions are gone from the screen, except for the one Amazon that was a refund. Let me just go back to it again. There it is. Except for the one that was a refund because that's a money in category. Let's go down a little bit further. Let's take a look at another vendor that happens quite a bit. And we're going to do the same rules, but we're going to do it based on dollar value. So for example, here, this one, Publix. So let's say, for example, Publix is a supermarket. And usually when I spend less than $30, it's for the office because it's like coffee or milk or something like that. And when it's more than $30, it's probably my own personal expenditure. So I'm going to create two rules for Publix, one for under 30 and one for over 30. So I'm going to come in here, type Publix for the vendor. Under category, let's put this is over 30. So let's put this one under owner's personal expenses. And then I'm going to create a rule for this transaction. And I'm going to put, let's call this one Publix over 30. Okay, so that's the name I'm giving it, Publix over 30. And then under amount, I'm going to do is greater than, let's do 30. So this rule says if the vendor name is Publix and the amount is over 30, then make it an owner's expense. So I'm going to go ahead and go to auto categorize and manually review, so no auto confirm. I'm going to click on save. Then I'm going to go back in. Actually, let's scroll down for a minute so we can see our Publix. And we see that some of these are automatically categorized. See, all the ones that are over $30 have been automatically categorized. So let me create another rule for the other category. So I'm going to click on rules and then go to my Publix over 30, and then click on edit on the drop down menu, and then click on copy. So I'm going to make a copy of it. And this will call it, Publix, let's say up to 30. And then this is less than, in this case, less than 30.01, right? So as long as it's up to $30, less than that, that would be. And instead of owner's personal expenses, we'll put this into office expense or something like that, right? And let's say, for example, that for these, I'm not going to auto confirm. So I'm going to click on save, go back into banking and the transactions. And now we can see all of our Publixes. Let me scroll down. Notice that they're all set up by rules, but there's different rules, right? Some rules send it to owner's personal expense, some send it to office expense. And then at this point, you can still change them. So you can still accept them one by one, accept this one, and then go back and say, you know what? This 2932, that one actually happened to be personal. So just come in here and change that to owner personal, click on add, but all the other transactions will not be affected because this is a hard rule. That's the nice thing about hard rules is you can change the categories on the fly, but the rules are going to stay true based on the rules. Now, the other one example I'll give you, let's go back and look at Starbucks, for example. So I got 4 Starbucks transactions. So I'm going to go to the first one and call the first one owner's expense. So let's say for whatever reason, I know that Starbucks transaction is an owner's expense. So I'll categorize that one for 1418 to owner's expense. So I'll click on add. Notice that all the other Starbucks are now automatically categorized to owner's expense, again, because QuickBooks is taking your last behavior. If I click on the next one, and then I call this one meals and entertainment or travel meals or whatever, and click on add, automatically all the other ones consequently will pick the last category that was used. So if you don't create a rule, QuickBooks is just going to go by the last thing you chose instead of going by the specific explicit rule that you decided to create. So you have to give it some thought in which, how you want to manage this. Now let's talk about the Amazon transactions that we just created. So if I go to reviewed and we see all the transactions from Amazon that were created, we can actually see here that all these transactions were put in there, and we can see the type of rule that was used. So in this case, this used the Amazon all rule. So if I click on filter and I click on rule, I can do no rule and click on apply, and I can see all the transactions that were manually added into QuickBooks by hand one by one. If I change the filter from no rule to any rule, I click on apply, then it'll be anything that has a rule, either a specific rule or a rule to automatically create. Or if I go here to auto add rule, this will be for the ones that were automatically added, so that will only show me those Amazon ones, which are the only ones that we chose to automate that rule to. So that gives you an idea how you can explore what you have already entered. And at this point, you can actually manually undo any of these. If I want to send this one Amazon to back there because I want to reclassify, I want to click on undo and then click on OK. Then I'm going to go back into for review. And there's my Amazon right here, letting me know that there's a rule for it. So now at this point, the rule is applied and I can accept it, or I can override this one and call this one owner's personal expenses if I want to, and then click on add. So that gives you, again, a really good control over what you want to do with these transactions. If you want to undo them, reclassify them, whatever you want. Another thing I want to show you is, what if I want to not create the rule, classify the transaction, and I don't want QuickBooks to be automatically classifying things for me. So let's go back and do 7-Eleven, and let's change this category to, no, let's put it in there into auto expenses. So once I add it into auto expenses and I click on add, as we mentioned earlier, these things here turn green and automatically gets categorized for you. But if I don't want this to happen, I can actually come in here, select any category. I'm going to click on, let's say, auto expenses. And then down here, it says, we will set 7-Eleven to auto expenses from now on. I can click on where it says edit this setting, and I can click on leave 7-Eleven on categorize. By doing that, and I click on save, what this will do is it will categorize that one, but then it will send all the other ones back to uncategorized expense. That's another option you can have as well. It's another idea that you can do. Other thing you can do is you can classify some of these things in batch before you accept them. So let's go back to, let's say, this one called La Granja. So let's say I'm going to select all these here. So I'm going to select all the ones that are La Granja, go to batch actions, click on modify selected, and then let's put this into meals and entertainment, and then click on apply. And what this is going to do is it's going to make them all meals and entertainment, but I haven't accepted them yet. So we just sort of pre-categorize them per se. And then at that point, we have them all categorized into one specific category. At this point, we can go one by one if we want to, and then decide which is the one that's going to get that category. But what's nice is then we can pick any one in particular that we want to change, go back and go to leave uncategorized, and then click on add, and then they become uncategorized again. So this is kind of the games you play, right? So QuickBooks will give you a category right off the bat. You can change them and let QuickBooks automatically put them in green if you don't click on leave as uncategorized, or you can manually click on leave as uncategorized and send them back to uncategorized. Another way you can send them back to uncategorized, let's look at a couple of transactions here that have been categorized as something. Let's see. Let's say these two right here. These two Starbucks were automatically categorized as meals and entertainment. So I can go to batch actions, modify, and put this into uncategorized expense. Click on not apply and add, just apply, and then apply will send them back to uncategorized, which is pretty cool. So now you're sort of starting on the uncategorized starting point. Again, everybody has their own use case or circumstances in which they're going to want to use bank rules in one way, shape, or form. Now, I'm going to show you one more thing that's kind of a deep bonus. Let's call it bonus tip. Here in the gear menu, the smaller gear, not the one all the way to the top right, the one just on top of the transactions, you have an option to click on Show Bank Details. If I click on Show Bank Details, instead of giving me the cleaned up version of the vendor list, is going to give me sort of the raw data that's coming from the bank. Now, what's interesting about raw data when it comes to chain restaurants like Starbucks, McDonald's, that sort of thing, you're actually going to get store numbers next to it. Let me click on bank detail again so we can see a couple of examples here. So we got Chick-fil-A, good example. Right next to it, it's got a store number. I just go to the same Chick-fil-A all the time, so there's no variation there. Dunkin' Donuts, same Dunkin' Donuts, not a good example. Let's go down one that could have multiple locations. Let's see. There's a good example here, Publix. So see, we got a Publix 1079, that's one store number, and Publix 1469, and Publix 1526. So I can actually create rules based on the specific location. So for example, let's do it with Shake Shack. It's probably a better example. So let's say, for example, this Shake Shack 1288 is one close to my house. And if I go to that Shake Shack, that's a personal expense. But this one called 1229 is next to my office. So if I go there, it's because I take my employees there and I want to categorize it differently. So at this point, and I'm going to use the name of the vendor to create the rules. So it's 1229 and 1288. So let's go to rules. And we'll go to new rule. And let's do the first one. Let's do Shake Shack personal. And then we're going to just call this Shake Shack. And the other condition is also going to contain 1229. So 1229, I don't remember which one it was, but let's call this one the personal one. So let's do a personal, and let's do the vendor name Shake Shack. And then we'll click on save. And then let's go into back into banking to see the other one. So where's my Shake Shack? 1229, because that was one. I had to go back and check if that rule was working. So Shake Shack. Let me copy the whole name here so I don't get that wrong. So Shake Shack 1229. Let's go back into the rules. Let's go look for that Shake Shack edit. So let's paste that in there. Shake Shack. And also contains, so let's say any of these. No, let's do all. Contains description 1229. That should work. 100% certain that should work. Let's try that again. Let's go to save. Go to banking. Let's see if that took. It didn't take. Interesting. I like the fact that this happened. Let's see how else we can sort this one out. There it is. Shake Shack 1229. Let's try something else. Let's try back into the rules. And let's go back into Shake Shack. Go to edit. And instead of description, let's do bank text. So bank text should be Shake Shack. And bank text 1229. And then click on save. Let's see if that works. Banking. Okay, that took. Okay, that worked. Okay, perfect. And let's say the one that has 1288, that's going to be meals, we said, right? So let's go back into rules. Let's go to that Shake Shack personal. Click on the drop down. Copy that rule. Let's call this one Shake Shack business. And this was 1288. And then this is going to be meals and entertainment, was it? Yeah. And then click on save. Go back to my banking and see if it cut both. There it is. So this was based on different variations of the name, not so much dollar amount. So this should give you a good idea of how bank rules work. Yes, it takes some time to build it up beforehand. You know, it is going to take some time to build up at the beginning, but over time, once you start downloading transactions, it's really going to speed up your workflow. So I hope you liked it, and I hope this will help you work even faster. Anyway, if you liked this video and you watched till the end, make sure you hit like, subscribe to the channel, and add some comments below. Did I miss anything? What should be my next video related to QuickBooks Online or bank fees, bank rules, whatever it is. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.